In your opinion, we could actually have a Bitcoin worth millions of dollars?
I would be very surprised if we did not.
Welcome to the future of money. Come with us on this journey into the world of Bitcoin, blockchain and crypto projects. You're going to meet the trailblazers. These people have changed my life and they may very well do the same for you.
So Aaron, we've had a bit of a giggle about my experience in OTC going back sort of 18 months. I guess because I was sort of out there and making some media, a lot of people started approaching me with these what seemed like incredibly outlandish requests for, do I know anyone that wanted to buy 100,000 BTC, often more. I went through a process of immersing myself in the space and spending numerous hours, days, weeks, months talking to a real interesting crowd of people who seem to want to sell $1 billion worth of BTC or buy $1 billion worth. So I'm hoping today you can shed a bit of light on the reality of the OTC space, what's going on there, and help educate people new to Bitcoin about the realities of buying and trading on exchanges and what is happening in the OTC space. So maybe first up, tell us a bit about yourself and how you've ended up in Bitcoin and in OTC.
Well, funny story, right? Because I'm probably not your typical Bitcoin kind of guy, right? I've always been from the institutional space, so I started my career with the Central Bank of Singapore, MAS. As you know, I think most people would have known MAS by now. I started my career there as a trader for fixed income, so I was trading on behalf of the central bank. But I decided that I wanted a new challenge, so I left shortly for a private equity and venture capital fund, and that was when we started to look at a lot at the blockchain space, and we realized that this was something to pay attention to because there was a lot of activity, a lot of interest in the space, and this was a very interesting period of time because this was all blockchain, not Bitcoin. It was almost as though Bitcoin was a taboo word, and blockchain was okay, but not Bitcoin, which was strange because I think by now most people would have realized that these are not terms that you can pull apart, right? These are sort of the same two flip sides of the same coin. So in 2017, the ICO bull run came along. I was already invested by then. Everyone was making money. I was telling my friends, hey, you should look at this, right? Bitcoin is very interesting. And then everyone was telling me, no, Bitcoin is too expensive. You got to buy Ripple. You got to buy, Tron was a big one as well. You got to buy this and that. There were so many coins that it was starting to get really difficult to follow what was going on, right? Thousands of them. And obviously 2018 came along and 2019. So I think we have been in the OTC space for a while right now. And our sort of a client base are typically high net worths and institutions. Primarily family offices. Right. So I think it is no open secret that I think institutions are probably going to be the next driving force for the next bull market as we approach halvening.
So OTC stands for over the counter.
Over the counter, yeah.
So are people rolling in with a bag full of cash to buy Bitcoins off you, or how does it all work?
Right. So I think OTC is a bit of a misnomer, right? Because there are probably a few misconceptions about the industry, right? When people think about OTC, they think about guys just bringing cash and then you just do this trade and then you're off to go, right? But I think the sector, the industry is bifurcating, right? You have guys who are in this space who don't do any KYC. They basically trade off their personal, hardware wallets, and then they just sort of hedge the risk on, let's say, Bitfinex. And then they just, it's a very informal process, a very peer-to-peer like process. And then on the other side, you have the
Is that illegal? I mean, it's different in every country, but is it, would if I sort of showed up here with a ledger and we swapped some, is it to do with an amount, or
I think it's a gray area right now because the regulators haven't really defined the business of an OTC, right? Because I think the regulators are still trying to wrap their heads around what Bitcoin means. How do you actually trace transactions? How do you actually look at UTXOs? I think we're not there yet.
What's a UTXO?
A UTXO is basically, in Bitcoin would be the input and output. So in the Ethereum world would be the address and the transaction. So you're basically tracing where the Bitcoins came from, basically. Right? So I think the regulators are still trying to wrap their heads around what's going on in the space. I don't think we will see any clarity in the next 6 months. But in the next 12 to 24 months, I think we will see something that would have a major shakeout in the industry where a lot of the guys who don't do KYC, the guys who don't trace the transactions properly would probably, we'll probably see a shakeout or some sort of, they would move underground.
Right. So your company basically is you're in the business of providing digital assets, primarily Bitcoin, to high net worth individuals, family offices, so institutional.
Great,
okay.
yeah.
So the institutions are in fact here and they are buying Bitcoin.
Yes, we know for a fact they are, but I think many of them would rather stay under the radar for now. And I think a lot of the institutions you would think about, let's say hedge funds and all, most of them have not changed their mandate, right? So mandate is basically what their investors allow them to invest in. So this is usually stated up front when they give them the money. So they will need to change the mandate before they will be allowed to invest in something like Bitcoin, because it has not been properly defined in what they're allowed to invest in.
Okay. So you mean sort of institutions like traditional banks, the brand names that people would be familiar with, they're not in this market yet?
I think a lot of them are on a more personal basis, so personal money. But in terms of corporate money, in terms of third-party custodized money, I don't think it's here yet.
Okay. And a lot of that's probably to do with the grey areas around the regulatory framework, I suppose.
I think that's one, but second is also custody, right? Custody hasn't really been solved yet, but I think with BUCK launching in a couple of days, I think that is going to be, it's going to be a game changer. Yeah,
23rd of September. Yeah, it's next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the physically settled exchange.
Right.
So do you think that's going to enable a much better price discovery, what the actual price of Bitcoin is? Because it's physically settled, not a cash settled scenario like a futures exchange.
I think so. And I think that's the same issue that people have been talking about a lot in the gold and silver markets as well.
Yeah.
Something that's cash settled may not have sufficient price discovery compared to something that's physical.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So is backed, would that be a competitor to what your company does, or?
I think everyone in the market has their own role to play, right? Because I think right now we are at a stage where a lot of the institutions, they don't understand Bitcoin. So a lot of what we do in our business is also education. And I think every OTC provider, every exchange, they have their role to play in terms of educating their customers on why you want to buy Bitcoin, right? We are not there yet. I think it would not. I think there's going to be a lot more it's going to be a lot more human relationship driven, at least in the early stages, because people don't understand how to operate a hardware ledger. They would need someone to teach them what UTXOs are. They will need all this guidance, which if let's say a high net worth were to go to buy 10 Bitcoins on BUCK, they wouldn't have a guy teaching them how to do certain things.
Who's your typical client? Is it that sort of person wanting 10 Bitcoin, or do you do thousands of Bitcoin for various people?
I think we see both, right? So we kind of see both, because high net worths, they are still, we don't really see people buying a lot of Bitcoins, because I think high net worths are still, I think it's funny because humans are like, they are already quite well off. They don't really see the need to, I want to make another million, another 10 million, right? They would, I don't mind putting 1% of my assets into Bitcoin, but they're not going to, start selling, the property they own somewhere for, 20 Bitcoins. They're probably not going to do that, right? So I think it's going to be a slow, but it's going to be a gradual sort of adoption of Bitcoin.
So the OTC space, how would you sort of characterize it? I mean, are there a handful of big players out there that you're all competing with, or there are literally hundreds of?
It's interesting because there are probably a few very, very large OTC players, and then there are some mid-sized ones, and then there are tons of those that are sort of small, that are operated on a more peer-to-peer basis. The folks that run on Huobi's OTC platform, the guys like who advertise on the local OTC channels. There are lots of them out there. But I think as the industry matures a little bit, I think we'll see a shakeout. Because the cost of compliance is going to be expensive, right? Because the regulators, I think, would probably demand OTC players to use software that will allow you to track coins, the origin of the coins, and that's going to be expensive.
So, where do you? What's the actual sort of flow? Do you work with mining operations, or how do you get your coins and provide them to people?
Right. So it's both as well. So we have sources from different providers, and we also have our own sort of a balance sheet that we work with. Some OTC providers, they also have a prop trading book, right? So they are able to trade within some of their risk limits, so they are able to take.
So you're operating a book
as well, right? So if you have a bullish view on Bitcoin, you could increase your position of Bitcoins on your company's balance sheet.
So what sort of percentage of your clients would be somebody that would, be hodling, so to speak, that would just buy and sit on them, or is it more a trading type scenario?
I'll say it's 50-50.
50-50, okay, that's interesting. And has that changed over time, or?
Okay, so I think what's interesting is that I think we see the hodling sort of phenomenon in the markets strengthening, right?
Yeah,
because we have been consolidating at 10,000.
Means the price is going to go up, right?
Right. Everyone thinks the price is going to go up. So it's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So when I talk to a lot of my friends, everyone's like, no, I've held Bitcoin at 10K for the past 3 months. Why would I sell now?
Yeah.
We're probably going to 15K, right? So over time, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think we see that on the on-chain metrics as well. The sort of the average age of unmoved Bitcoins is going up over time.
Yep.
So I mean, we call this hodl waves, right? So I think people are hodling their coins more.
Okay. So for somebody new to the space who buys a Bitcoin on Huobi or an exchange and starts playing around trading, what would you say to those people about what's happening in the OTC market? Is that really where the action is at as far as price is concerned, or?
So I think the funny thing about OTC is that there are a lot of these we call them middlemen, right, or intermediaries. These are the people who, on Telegram you'll find tons of them. They will say that, oh, I have a buyer's mandate, I have a seller's mandate, I have a guy who has 1,000 BTCs to sell. Find me someone who can take the order, right? Yeah. It's funny because there are hundreds.
Are they real, these deals?
Exactly, and 99% of them don't ever close because just too many middlemen in between, which. Yeah. And then everyone's like, no, you send me the coins first. No, you send me the cash first, right? Yeah. So they've developed, procedures like proof of satoshis, proof of coins, things like that, right?
Yes, I've been involved in a few of these.
So you want to meet in a private bank's office, things like that, right? So I think this industry has also evolved for more professional players to come in and sort of. I wouldn't say muscle these guys out, but to provide a more proper platform for people who want to do deals like this to exist in a more safe environment. And we also do escrow for that kind of services as well.
Right. So basically, a mining operation would maybe deposit the coin with you, so it's already there, so that Mexican standoff, so to speak, doesn't happen. You go first. No, you go first.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fantastic.
And that's a very prevalent problem because you have guys from Europe trying to sell or buy, and then you have guys from China who want to sell, and a lot of times the coins themselves are not really, you don't know the origin of the coins.
You mentioned China, your main office is Hong Kong, right?
Right, yes.
I sort of hear different stories, maybe you can sort of clarify this for me. I know there was a huge amount of OTC trade in Bitcoin with very wealthy Chinese individual. What is the situation now? What's the legal framework in China? Can you buy Bitcoin if you're Chinese?
It's a grey area that I don't think anyone has a clear answer to because we obviously know that it's a grey area, but the vast majority of volume still comes from China. The volume and liquidity it's still there. Okay. So it is.
So exchanges were made illegal there effectively, but if you're worth a lot of money and you want to move out of China, maybe Bitcoin is still being used.
Right. Well, it's more Tether than Bitcoin, but
I haven't quite wrapped my head around that one yet. That's next.
Yeah, it's
Where do you buy Tether?
Tether is still okay. So Tether is used more frequently than Bitcoin because it has a lot of liquidity. Number one. Number two, there's no price risk. Right. A lot of people who are using it as the primary use case is to simply move money around. Yeah. Illegally or legally.
So you can just buy Tether off exchanges? Is that where people buy it, or?
Yeah, exchanges.
Or do OTC desks
OTC desks as well.
Oh, they do. Okay, right. And do you buy it is there a premium, or are you?
Interestingly, the premium doesn't really exist in Tether as much as. Well, we've been hearing that stable coins like DAI, so the decentralized stablecoin built on MakerDAO, that's trading at a premium in China apparently because it's decentralized and it means that KYC and in the future KYT, know your transactions. It would be much harder for someone to peer into the origin of your stablecoins.
So, a couple of interesting questions. Obviously, people would use a OTC company because of what's called slippage, right? So in other words, if you wanted to buy a bunch of it of Bitcoin, if you did it on an exchange, the price would move dramatically and just wouldn't work for you. Which brings me to an interesting question. What I've sort of heard the figure of 400 million, maybe $500 million. If you had that sort of liquidity yourself, you can really move this market around with a short squeeze on a BitMEX.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, can you maybe explain to people how that works and what they should be aware of if you were using a BitMEX, etc.?
Well, I think it's really no secret that the market is still very thinly traded. Relative to traditional markets.
Yeah.
If you had 100 million, 500 million, you could probably move the markets quite significantly, right? And the liquidity is disparate, right? The liquidity pools are disparate around dispersed, in different exchanges, right? So you have arbitrage funds that try to arbitrage, through APIs among these different exchanges.
Yep.
But they may not necessarily act fast enough. So in certain cases, in certain exchanges, you may get massive slippage. So you have this candles that go all the way down and go all the way up, right?
Yep.
And it has happened quite frequently. So and a bad actor in the space could definitely do that.
Yeah. So is it a bad actor though? I guess if you've got that sort of money and you want to move the market, then is it a bad actor? It's not illegal.
Or maybe it is the exchanges themselves that are that they have visibility over the client's orders, and they could move prices beyond their stop losses and then move it back up. Right. So these things are actually quite common in the FX forex trading industry as well.
Okay. So obviously working for a large OTC company, you must have some pretty good insights into what you see happening. What would you say? What do you see happening in the price of Bitcoin over the rest of 2019?
Well, I'm extremely bullish.
You're bullish. Okay.
I think that we also do a lot of education, seminars and talks to a lot of the family offices here in Singapore as well as Hong Kong, high net worths as well. And I think people are starting to get it. The narrative for Bitcoin has changed, right? It used to be in 2016, 2017, this was a toy, this was a Ponzi, it's not going to last. And right now people are looking at this, maybe I should get involved, this isn't going away, I'm not sure what Bitcoin is, but I got to start learning. Okay. And I think,
Okay, so the likes of Tim Draper, who sort of had a $250,000 prediction by 2022, he's bumping that up now. I've followed Tyler Jenks, who I'm sure you're familiar with, his analysis saying, look, Bitcoin could be worth 100 million, which is effectively global debt times the supply. You've got other people talking 4 trillion now if we have a major economic collapse, and Bitcoin is used as collateral against that debt. What do you think those sort of macroeconomic scenarios, do you think that could actually come to play with institutions looking at it as a...
I think so.
You do?
I think so.
So we could, in your opinion, we could actually have a Bitcoin worth millions of dollars in those
I would be
scenarios?
very surprised if we did not, because...
really?
Right,
Wow,
because to me it represents a very binary bet, right?
Right.
It either goes to zero if fees were insufficient to subsidize because right now we have the block reward subsidy, right? So it either is going to disappear in the next 50 years or it is going to be very valuable in 50 years, which is what Satoshi himself said in the white paper, right?
Okay. Who's Satoshi?
I don't know, you gotta... if you ever know, let me know.
Is he Australian?
It's Australian? Probably not.
No comment from you, right? Okay.
No
Fair enough. All right. Okay, interesting. So what sort of people would you like to hear from?
Sorry, you mean
clients? I mean, who should contact you?
People who are interested to learn about Bitcoin. High net worths, family offices, institutions who are interested to learn more about Bitcoin from an institutional perspective, right? Okay. So the correlations between Bitcoin and the other asset classes, how it diversifies institutional portfolios from a Markowitz modern portfolio theory. Okay. The valuation frameworks that people are using in the space, whether that's stock to flow, whether that's percentage of money supply, whether that's inflationary as a deflationary asset, and I think these are the sort of these are things that institutions haven't really understood, and I think these are things that we can clarify for a lot of our clients. Right.
So, what's sort of the minimum size Bitcoin trade you would be involved in?
We don't really enforce any minimums right now, but we tend to trade at least 25 BTC.
25. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm too small fry for you at the moment.
Well,
Okay.
For many of our clients, we have gone as small as like 25K US,
Yep.
which is just 2.5 BTC.
Okay. Right. So I guess in summary, what I'm taking from this is you're seeing a lot more institutional interest in Bitcoin.
Yep.
And you're bullish on the short, medium, and long term, or I mean a lot of
Short,
traders.
medium, and long term.
Short, medium, and long term. Interesting. Okay. Right, I better get out of here and go and find a job so I can buy some Bitcoin. Listen, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to let the audience know? We're obviously looking to appeal to people feeling new in the space.
Right. I would educate myself on Bitcoin. Like, this is going to be a generational thing for people who are living in the world today.
Yep.
Maybe not our parents, maybe not our grandparents, but I think this is something that would be a very important part of our lives.
Okay. I guess lastly, obviously covering the Bitcoin space, I have done for about 4 years now. There's been these forks in Bitcoin. So we've got Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV. I'm intrigued. You're going to introduce me to some Bitcoin maximalists here in Singapore over the next week or two. We know it's a very tribal environment. Do you, because this is ultimately the same code, the Bitcoin code, I don't consider them altcoins like the other 2,000 things out there. Do you think there's a chance that either of those forks of Bitcoin have the possibility of being perceived as the real Bitcoin by a wider population in the coming years?
Well, may the best coin win, right? If Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV were to win, may the best coin win, but they would have to win people like me over.
Correct. Right. Okay. So, Craig, give Aaron a call. We're actually jumping on a vlog shortly with Craig.
Right.
I'm off to Look, I personally, I'm taking a bit of flack for covering those two projects. I simply don't understand why I get that flack, because I think it's, like anything, if you're part of a 99% crowd, you often get it wrong. I think these projects should be taken seriously. I think this is early days. Obviously, Bitcoin BTC has got a massive head start. Let's see where that goes. But my position is to not write off those projects. Really understand what they are doing, because I do think we're still very, very early here.
We are.
The next year is going to be fascinating.
Fascinating.
It really is, isn't it? Yep. Thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed this, and I look forward to meeting some of the maximalists here in Singapore.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.